Welcome to our creativity conversation today. These events allow us to hear distinguished scholars, artists, and creators speak about the role of creativity in their lives through the give and take of a conversation between engaged minds. Today's guest and interlocutor barely need any introduction, so I will try to be very succinct. Emory University President James W. Wagner. Jim has served as president of Emory University since 2003. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in clinical engineering, and a PhD in materials science and engineering. He is a charter fellow of the National Academy of Inventors and a fellow in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is also a gifted leader, a viewer of deep space, and I do hope this will come up in the conversation. And he has been deeply engaged with the role of higher education in our contemporary lives. Rosemary Magee currently serves as a director of Emory's Stuart Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Books Library. It's a mouthful. She is uniquely qualified to guide this conversation, having previously served as the vice president and secretary of the university for most of President Wagner's tenure. She is also the instigator of these creativity conversations, and I like to think of her as our own Terry Gross. This afternoon, they will talk about President Wagner's inspiration for his own creativity, as well as how he has tapped into these energies for his work in organizational leadership. Please join me in welcoming Jim Wagner and Rosemary Magee.
Welcome, everybody, and especially welcome back to you, Jim. You've been here at the Rose Library on several occasions already, and we hope there will be many more. Do you remember what you first said to me when I asked you if you'd like to engage in a creativity conversation?
I probably demurred. No, I don't recall. I don't recall.
Well, you actually said, normally I think you have pretty good judgment. But I'm beginning to question it. But after we had another opportunity for conversation, discussion, it seemed like you felt more comfortable. And I felt I was very inspired to do this based on our many kind of informal creativity conversations. And also because I'm somewhat familiar with some of your other creative projects. Most people here know you as the president of Emory University. But also your work on restoring cars, your photography, which Leslie referenced, your work with clocks, and I'd like to ask you about how you think about those as creative endeavors.
Well, first of all, thank you for insisting. I think, I'll let you know at the end. And it is a privilege, actually, to have our, interlocutor be both a colleague and a friend, so thank you for that. You've asked the key question. I've been pondering that question, why you would imagine that the work I do, the photography work I do is astrophotography. It's looking into space. And the car restoration, and you mentioned the clock building. Actually, I do a broad range of fabrication things, a little machine shop there at Low Water.
Right.
To work with all ranges of materials.
Did you create that? Was that something you installed?
Oh yeah, yeah. Very few presidents' homes come with a machine shop.
That would be my guess. Yeah.
But my form of creativity, the sort of creativity that I imagine is what an audience like this might be prepared to hear about. Is a creativity of expression, and I envy those who have that. My creativity is not one that leads to poetry and literature or to visual art or to dance. I was trying to find, is there ever an experience in my life where I do any of those things? And embarrassingly,
barbershop quartet.
Yeah, I did some. Don't ask for that now. But some, and I guess it all counts in your broader definition of that. But to try to answer your question, how those things link together and why they're elements of creativity, the closest that I could come to is I assume that there is some connection with creativity and wonder, and how we handle wonder, how we communicate when words aren't enough. And I think how do we, it seems to me when faced with wonder, you have either the option to say, I'm confused about it and I'm going to try to get it out of my mind, or I'm going to try to deal with it. I do most of that dealing, I'm afraid, internally. Well, you've had more experience with my external side. But that's, my photography of, you're generous to call it photography. Astrophotography, I was just on Sunday down at the opening of the Science Center at Oxford and saw the work of the astronomy club there, including astrographs that far exceed the quality of the work that I do. Okay? If you don't know, if you come to the Low-Water House, and for a few more months, if you look at the top of the, right over the entryway, or the part that looks most like a castle, you'll have to look very closely between the parapets. What do you call them? Crenellation? Never called them crenellation, but that's okay. There is a large plastic dome which houses the telescope mount. And the challenge for me has been to try to take some of these photographs through what's called, and I think it's too pejorative, it's called light pollution. Right. But it's the environment, the existing environment, and to try to see some of these things that are way out in space, that aren't obvious to your eye. But I will.
So what have you seen?
I have seen, the things I enjoy seeing most, believe it or not, goes beyond the planets. I do enjoy, you used a word that actually is a technical phrase, I do enjoy looking into deep space. I enjoy looking at nebulae. Nebulae are the gases that are somehow illuminated. Sometimes they glow because there's X-ray sources nearby, sometimes they're illuminated by stars. And there are two big categories of nebulae, right? There are those that are nebulae where the gases are condensing to give birth to stars. The nebula, the Great Nebula, and one of the brightest ones, happily, in the constellation Orion, seems to be birthing 4 or 5 stars. It almost looks like a nest of stars. And then there are other nebulae that are the remnant of wasted stars, stars that have exploded, collapsed. Some of these are called planetary nebulae. They have much more form to them. They're not this random nest, but sometimes they have rings. In fact, one's called the ring nebulas. And that's the other end of the lifetime of a star. Can I say something about why this is interesting?
Yes.
It's fascinating. Is there any subject you think about that is awesome because of what's absent? The distance between stars is hard for us to fathom. In fact, it's so hard to fathom that we stop using miles and centimeters and meters, and we start using time, light years. So let me explain some of the wonder of this. The furthest you could possibly see, Hubble telescope stuff, spaceborne telescope stuff, you're talking 13 billion light years, okay? But even the stuff here, between us and the sun is something on the order of 8 or 9 light minutes, okay? So I've been trying hard. So that's the wonder, okay? And I've been trying hard and will continue to try, and I will give you an imperfect way that I've tried to deal with that, and it might even be creative. So I want you to imagine, so what that means is when I stand here on Earth, and we stand here on Earth, and I see a star that's 1 billion light years away. By the way, this event, if you followed it, there was all this excitement about gravity waves being discovered, right? And they say these waves were discovered because 2 black holes circle around each other and hit. Well, they did that 1 billion years ago. It's just that the news is just now getting to us. And literally, that one's almost 1 billion years ago. So imagine, I tried to say, how do you help people to appreciate this? Imagine that all you know about life in certain cities comes to you by a newspaper. A newspaper that's been published every day. From Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, a newspaper is published every day. And it's carried to you by a snail. okay? See, space is so big that light may as well be a snail. It's traveling, it appears to be traveling. Because it's traveling over such great distances, it takes forever. And so, go back to this image. So when you're in Washington today, Washington, D.C. today, you're hearing all about the news on Congress, et cetera. But as you move west, and you get to St. Louis, and you move all the way west, when you finally get to San Francisco, what you will know about Washington, D.C. is what the snail happened to deliver today. And you're hearing the news of Lincoln's assassination. And the newspaper that gets from St. Louis, you're hearing the news of Pearl Harbor. Okay? And yet you're living at the present here. The point is, if you could only learn about people and the world based on snail's pace communication, there's no place to stand to learn about everything happening at this instant. Doesn't that blow your mind? I mean, that we can't know what's happening this instant in our universe. It's happening. It is actual data. It's rock hard data, but you can't know it. I find that very humbling, and I find that, do you understand what I'm saying? Many of these stars we will look at tonight, assuming the clouds give us a break, aren't there. They just aren't there today. They've exploded and gone away a billion more years ago, but their light is still, the snail is still carrying the newspaper. Is that making any sense to me? And so do you see why it's so much fun to try to conjecture about what's really happening? And by the way, if you were to move from San Francisco to Hawaii, the future is already there. And yet all I can get is a snail's, well, an aquatic snail's base delivery of what's happening in Hawaii. So maybe you don't want to talk about that anymore, but that is what fascinates me. That's what fascinates me about looking up. And most of us don't. Most of us imagine that it's a picture of something very static, and it's yet very, very alive, and it gives me a sense of what I can't know, and it's very humbling.
Do you think looking up is in some way connected to looking inward in terms of our ability to fathom what we know about ourselves as well as the universe?
Well certainly. I do. Maybe not in the sense that I can't tell. I can't trust what's happening at my fingertips. I don't mean that. I mean the sense that imagining where am I and how do I fit? How do I fit in this? It helps to understand, different environments and where one, and help to appreciate our understandings, for me, to help appreciate understandings of the environments that we're in. If you go back to the analogy, and it's going to get worn thin here very quickly, but if you were to decide to take a plane flight from San Francisco back to D.C., and you dressed in top hat to honor the president's funeral, when you arrived, that's not what would be happening there at all. So it gives me a certain comfort with disorientation and wanting just to know more rather than to presuppose and judge. To presuppose that because what I am hearing has come from, to presuppose that that's the reality of what's happening at that place or at some time is a form of arrogance. And instead to imagine that there's more to know and to be experienced and be open to that, I think then it does have an internal, internal. Look, this whole notion, we could have gone the other direction, right? We could have been talking about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You and I have actually, believe it or not, we have taught quantum physics together. And Heisenberg's principle comes to the same conclusion. It is simply that on a very, very small scale, for smallest particles you can imagine, okay, the components of an atom, you can know either where this little electron is or proton is, or you can know its direction and velocity. But you can't know both. You're just not allowed. You can't know it with any kind of accuracy. And so the conclusion is the same. There is rock hard real information in the world, and you can't have it. These issues of the notion that there is information that exists that you can't have has even I think it has even religious implications. And I don't know if you wanted to go there, but I think it does. And it has a certain implication about faith, let's put it that way.
Right. So, actually, when you were talking about that, it made me think, naturally, about the archives. Because in a way...
Is this a commercial moment?
Yeah, right. Well, I was just thinking about, in a way, when our students and faculty, and we just had the pleasure of seeing Hank Klemenoff's class and session, when they're going into and reading a newspaper from a certain era or reading a poem from a certain moment, you're re-immersing yourself in the experience of that moment. You're, in a way, it's, as you say, it's a kind of wondering. It's a kind of wonder about what's going to be revealed to you. And the most meaningful part of it is if you're not presupposing that you already know the answer. And it's actually a different kind of time travel.
Absolutely. And in fact, the human notion is, the human temptation, my temptation, I won't speak for all humans, but my temptation is to fill in the blanks. I don't know this, so I'm going to fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks with my biases, with my... And by the way, often it's done very innocently. Let's go back to space for just a moment. At Copernicus's time, Copernicus was one of the ones that first said, well, maybe the sun's in the middle. It was Galileo that championed this. But back in that time, and by the way, speaking of the Rose Library.
Yes, I was going to get there too, but you can go right on ahead.
In Mr. Rose's own personal library, which I hope you're doing your best to find a new home for, there are little calculators and enormous books about the stars with little paper calculators. You set the date and whatnot to figure out where the planets would be. See, we know the planets go across the sun and around the sun, and we're doing the same thing. That wasn't necessarily assumed. Because if you plot, by the way, planet just means wanderer. You wake up every night and you see exactly the same constellations. They don't seem to move. But then there were these bright orbs, these bright things that do move. Because tomorrow when I get up there, it's here. And that's over here. In fact, what blew everybody's mind is they would come to stop sometimes, and then they would retrograde, and then they would keep going. So you needed these little calendars to figure that out. By the way, if you could put your brain on, you'd have to really imagine us going around the sun and Jupiter going around the sun to figure out why it is it would appear that Jupiter goes backwards every now and then. But you can get that. But they weren't stupid people, right? And they said, those planets have to be made of a different material we don't experience here on Earth. Right? They were wrong, but that was their conjecture. They filled in the blanks. Now, why is that germane today? We see galaxies out there spinning, right? Galaxies spinning. They're spinning much too fast. They should be throwing material away. Now, by the way, this is an amateur talk. Okay, so we should talk something I really know eventually. But and they're not. The material is not spinning away. Instead, it's being held in a tight orbit and brought. So there must be much, much more mass holding them in, because you need mass to hold these things in. But it's not a material we detect. It's not a material that we experience on Earth. In fact, right now for a holding, we call it dark matter. I'm wondering if we shouldn't be as suspicious of today's dark matter as folks several hundred years ago should have been suspicious of some other matter that allowed planets to turn on a dime and come back. We've filled in the blanks. Now, if they're astronomers, I know I've offended you. But I think we should be that suspicious, that skeptical of human invention to fill up the space of wonder that we are so uncomfortable with. And by the way, wonder should make us uncomfortable, and that should make us creative. But to create, and we should be careful to create theory as opposed to asserting that, oh, I know, it must be dark matter. And of course, we have another dark energy thing that's even more spooky. But how is that an answer to your question?
Well, I don't know, but it makes me wonder about a couple of others. I was actually going to ask you if you had a theory of creativity, and you've really essentially, for yourself, a personal theory of creativity, and you've answered that in a way that it has to do with wonder, that's what energizes you, propels you, and I think we can all sense that. We feel that when you're talking about it, you have that kind of. Do you also experience when you're working on, when you're actually in the midst of a project that you might be working on, a lot of people refer to a sense of flow, that they lose a sense of time and place, that they're so immersed in it that they become a part of the process.
And I assume real artists, some of you are here, have that feeling as well. Yeah, no question about it. In fact, I can't, and I don't even think real artists can explain that. I have discovered that and known that my whole life, that there are certain activities that about which time is irrelevant. In ways I wish my whole life were that way. On the other hand, I found it an important adjunct to this job, right, to be able to be taken away by these sort of what you have deemed, and I'm not quite ready to say reconstructing an old car is necessarily a creative endeavor, because at the end of the day I want the car to look like it did originally. It's not like I'm making a new.
But are you following a set of instructions that tell you how to do that?
Only to a limit. Only to a limit. The car was, the most recent car was especially fun. It was it is.
Is that the one I saw you in the other day?
You did, the green
yeah,
one?
Yeah, I happened to bump into Jim and Debbie in Longwater the other day. It's very cute.
Not physically.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, he did not run over me.
But as you saw, it's a 1950 two-seat, British MG TD.
Yes,
And
it's very nice.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. I've got a picture on my cell phone. Most people have their grandchildren. But that was especially fun. The story there was, as you also know, I have an old 1920 Model T Ford, and one of our facilities workers noticed that old car, and one time he said, "Are you interested in buying another old car?" And I said, "What do you have in mind?" And he mentioned this MG, and I did just what some of you did. I know that car. And he said, but there's a hitch. And I said, "What's the hitch?" He said, "Well, I thought I would restore it too." He said, "I towed it to a place in North Carolina, and started having them do the restoration. In the meantime, I found a fully restored car and purchased it. My wife won't let me keep both," he said. But the car I have for you is entirely in pieces.
Wow.
And so it was a puzzle. It was so much fun. No, very serious. Where does this go? The worrisome thing is you get finished with a portion of it and there's extra parts. But it took 6 years. The university didn't give me a whole lot of time, but it took 6 years to complete. And it was, so when you asked was there an instruction manual, the answer was no.
Yeah, so that feels to me, on the face of it, that is a creative process, because you're getting from here to there with no real instructions on how to do it. And I guess in that way it may be also more our conventional ideas about engineering is that it's problem solving, but I think I've heard you say that that's not the only way to look at engineering, is solely about solving problems.
Yeah, in fact, that's what got me in trouble and ended up being a dean of engineering. I do think, and people are so kind when they say, "Oh, we love," those who hired me to come here, say, isn't it great we have a problem solver, we have an engineer. And they didn't know that inside that made my skin crawl, right? Because part of what I thought engineers should be, and anybody should be for that matter, is they should be people who do engineering. People who are healers and physicians. People who are expert in business, but people first. And the problem with, you're going to make me tell that story, aren't you, about favorite engineers? But let me not tell that just yet. To be only a problem solver is to diminish what it means to be human. And so I was speaking to a group at Case Western Reserve University who wondered if I might serve as dean there, coming from Johns Hopkins. And I said, well, look, they asked the classic question. They asked the classic first interview. So why do you want to be a dean? I said, I thought this was going to be over after I said it, and I didn't do it intentionally. I just blurted. I said, no, I have no interest in being a dean. I said, but I think to pigeonhole engineers as problem solvers who are solving only someone else's problems because they aren't engaged society in such a way that they are actually alerting themselves to problems, defining them in terms that engineers can solve, and then being problem solvers, is asking too little and expecting too little and teaching improperly what engineers should be. So they offered me the job. But it went almost like that. In fact, I cringed afterwards because I just told the search committee that I had no interest in being a dean. But I said that, if I had to be a dean in order to do these things, I would stomach it.
And just to pause there, Jim, I've noticed, I think, every single time when you introduce yourself now as serving in your current role, you don't say, I'm Jim Wagner, president of Emory University. You say, I'm Jim Wagner, and I'm proud to serve in the role as president of the university, or words to that effect.
That's a secret we can
share it with the world.
Share.
It's now on
Actually,
YouTube.
there's a couple in this room with whom I have discussed this. That was just a personal discipline about being a person.
Right.
It's often the case that I don't get introduced, but it's my role to thump on the microphone and say, good evening. And I have tried steadfastly throughout my time here and in prior assignments to say, good evening, my name is Jim Wagner. It's my pleasure to be serving Emory as its president. And nobody notices, and I don't want them to notice. It's a statement I make to me.
Right.
Because I am, it's not true that I am the president of Emory University. I've seen, and you have too, you've seen people retire from their positions. And to the extent that they have said, I am my position, when the position goes away, what am they? And you're giggling, but I'll bet you know somebody who has so struggled, separated from that chapter in their life that has been, or set of chapters in their life that has been their career calling, has so struggled with identity. I'm not guaranteeing that I won't, but I do know that part of what I have told myself, and it's not just behind the microphone, and people come up, and Debbie has some funny stories where we have had folks come up and they say, oh, you're wearing an Emory t-shirt, and they finally get around to saying, oh, so you are Emory's president. And I've worked on 2 or 3 deflections for me. I say, why, yes, that's my job. Why, yes, that's what they asked me to do there. I have 2 or 3 more. But it's not for that person. And I hope nobody notices. I don't want them to notice. I need me to notice that this place has shaped me and changed me powerfully, but it hasn't been me, and I it. Does that? You and I have talked about that. You're one of the few with whom that 13-year-old discipline has been shared.
Right.
So thanks for divulging.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize it was a secret. It's no longer a secret. But I think in a way it's revealing as well about the other things in life that contribute to the being, and in a way we're all sort of creative beings. We're pulling together these various parts of our lives. And I was going to ask you, do you see things that you learn from the puzzle putting a car together or the wonder of the universe that translate into the workings of the university, not so much in trying to fix it, those parts of our job that require fixing or managing or administering, but really how to encourage and appreciate the kind of creative energies that we have around us.
The answer is yes. Okay, and again, it is dependent somewhat. It's not dependent on all of our backgrounds. I have a background in electrical engineering, background in some biomedical stuff, and background in material science. The car piece is teaching me all the time. I love discovering the ingenuity of the people who conceived it and put it together, who I consider the real creators. Okay, as I say, we're still going to have a fight about whether or not I belong here today.
I think I won that one.
But also because of my materials background, there's certain things I hold in my hand and I feel in a different way. In fact, when I taught and loved teaching, and I had enough seniority, I would request to teach graduate level classes, and then I would request to teach introductory classes. I also would request never to teach a class less than 3 years in a row, because the first year you're putting all the energy into it, and the second year you're refining it, and the third year you're enjoying it. Okay, so you need at least 3 years. But I would teach introduction to materials. It was a privilege to do that because almost all of us in this room come to the world of hard reality with not enough wonder and curiosity, that this is just stuff. There's hard stuff and soft stuff, and there's transparent stuff, and there's opaque stuff, and there's heavy stuff and light stuff. Oh, that's such a limited vocabulary.
There's far away stuff, and there's nearby stuff.
But when I'm with, a lot of you could do this, but I just have to pick up a piece of steel and a piece of aluminum, and I can tell you, not even pick them up, I can just touch them and say, this is aluminum, this is steel. And it's because the way they take the heat away from my fingers, aluminum is so much faster. Now, if you pick them up, it's a giveaway because the density of aluminum is so much lighter than steel. But similarly, you could put lead. And so, man, you're making me start to wonder about being creative. So perhaps in a way that a potter feels the consistency of clay or something like that, I can feel a fender. I can feel when it's been hardened in use. Most of us may not realize that metals in particular, the more you use them, actually, the harder they get. Yes, there's fatigue that can take place. But in general, if you use a material bent, straighten out a paper clip tomorrow. You can't. It'll always have little hips and bumps in it where it's gotten hard by having been turned in the first place. You just can't, well, I can tell you how to do it, but in general, you can't. And so knowing that a fender has been bolted and unbolted 2 or 3 times, that's just like a paper clip being bent 2 or 3 times. And I can feel that. This is really boring.
No, it's good. So that kind of observation about the way things work in the world, objects and materials work in the world, that kind of observation, and I guess you also mentioned the ingenuity that goes into creating things. That observation goes into sort of the observation of what you see in the kind of the universe of the university as well.
Exactly so. Exactly so. Although, just as I wouldn't drive that MG, it's certainly not the Model T, on an interstate. Model T would, my cruising speed on a Model T is just under 30 miles an hour. And I do wonder about whether or not we are driving our universities on the interstate inappropriately. A place like Emory University was conceived, and we were talking about this at lunchtime today, with a group of brothers in one of the fraternities. Our university was conceived to educate white male Protestant Christians. By my back-of-the-envelope calculation, 90% of our students today do not fit those categories, do not fit that category. Okay? The MG was designed to drive on British kind of gravel road. Well, actually, it was also sold to American servicemen who fell in love with it, but it was designed for two-lane country highways, hard top and gravel. The Model T was designed to go on horse trails, right? Great big wheels. And it just doesn't work as well on today's interstate system. Have we been redesigning our universities to work as well on an informational interstate system where the expectations of society have changed, where the opportunities to deliver our students more effectively and efficiently need to be fully taken advantage of? I think that's some of the excitement. So when I pop the hood in your car, well, actually you can't see anything when I pop the hood in your car, but if you take things apart a little bit so that you can see things, you see how it's adapted and engineered and changed for a new set of circumstances. Emory's and American universities have evolved, but it seems to me they've been tugged along. Come on, anybody here that's got a sports car, a Porsche, or even a Tesla or something like that, realizes that there are not that many places to really try that car out, to stretch its legs. In other words, in some ways, the car is asking for a better environment. I don't think many of our universities are doing that. I think our universities are on the other side of history, where we are still chasing after what it means. The good news is the individuals in our university, the professors in our university, are trying to be out in front of all of this. And so the question is, are our universities as systems accommodating the students who deserve to be on the superhighway of knowledge, and the Porsches that we have hired to be our professors? Not yet. You didn't want to talk about that either.
But what about the experience of driving your car? I mean, luckily you've had low water. Were you running errands or something in it? Were you able to?
What were you doing Saturday? You were in the car, right?
She was.
No, you weren't.
Oh,
Oh, right. I came to the office.
Yeah,
I had
okay, so
something to
you
do
weren't.
with it, and it was a nice enough day.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. So, but isn't there something valuable about that experience? I mean, obviously, you were of going down the gravel roads or the dirt paths, or slowing down and seeing what's around you, going 30 miles per hour. So really an interesting question is how you both accommodate that, the world moving forward, the light years ahead of us, and also that the experience in the present of appreciating that.
Oh, sure. Yes, there is that. I look for roads to travel on that I will not inconvenience the people behind me, and I will enjoy being able to look. It's interesting, though, the combination of finding, less comfortable and more tortuous routes, and the need to sort of urge an old car along. Actually, in some ways, because it's more absorbing, in some ways you have less opportunity. Neither of those cars have a radio, and I don't think I could have the luxury of listening to one while I'm there. There's certain things you pay attention to.
Right.
Sounds. On the other hand, yes, I enjoy understanding and playing with the innovations of these different cars. As I said, the Model T was designed to run in horse ruts and carriage ruts, and it sits very high like a carriage. And most of the accidents with Model Ts were rolling them over. The MG he tried to get the weight of the car actually below the center of the axles if possible. It turns out if you do that successfully, well, when you go around and turn in a normal car, it would want to roll over. If you're underslung like that, like the MG tried to be, when you go around a turn, the car actually tilts into the turn and slides across the road. so I enjoy understanding the genius of the people, who did that.
Right, and I guess by extension, appreciating the genius of the people who are engaged in the work here at the university as well.
Yeah, I didn't know the connection you were trying. I didn't understand the connection. I don't. It's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different. I have complete responsibility for the car. So I guess it's a lot different. And I'm not serving the car. The car's serving me. In this case, we have an obligation to students, well, broadly to society, but an obligation to students, to scholars and researchers and to professors. And no, I think there's a different dynamic there. How do you become the road paver and the pothole filler that allows transportation down the education and scholarship highways for the people that you have engaged? I think until you do those kinds of things, you take too much responsibility for holding things back. Instead, what you really want to do is transfer the responsibility and say, I've given you, as best we can, the open highways. Drive hard, drive fast.
Here's the space. Here's the space. Here's the place.
Here's the space.
Do you think? What do you think the things that we can do to kind of nurture creative energy or the sense of wonder that you talked about? What are some of the things that you strive to do, or that we can do as a community?
One is to resist a decade-long trend, maybe decades-long trend, about the society's understanding of the university as a utilitarian entity. That our purpose is to help prepare our graduates to get great jobs. Now, by the way, I hope all our graduates get great jobs. That's not what I'm saying. But to define a university so narrowly is actually collapsing what we have been and not engaging the creativity about what we serve. President Obama fell prey to some of this in the fall of 2013. He began a series, in his stump speeches, he had the same paragraph about how our great universities are going to be understood as those whose graduates have the greatest rate of gainful employment, and how it is they have opened their doors most broadly to educate more people of all range. And there's truth and goodness in all of that. There's also some falsehood. I mean, if Emory were absolutely free next fall, absolutely free, we would educate not one more student. Right? What we need to be challenged to be is creatively, well, how is it that a place like Emory could touch more people? And there are all kinds of crazy ways to think about how you can use a four-year campus for 5 years of education. You know, if you required a semester abroad, and if you could figure out this electronic education such that people would, in fact, we were engaged in a program, you were here at the time, called Semester Online. Suppose everybody had to take a semester abroad and a semester online. That's 2 semesters. That's a full year of their absence from this campus, during which time, well, as the result would be, we'd have 4 years of people on campus, 1 year of people. We'd be educating 5 people with 4 years of facilities. And that's creative, actually. But when you ask how to push back, I don't think anybody, I shouldn't say anybody, the greatest concentration of people who understand the potential of what universities should mean for society broadly, unfortunately, are within the universities. I say it's unfortunate because it appears self-serving when we say, if we could triple the rate at which technology evolves, if we could bring all the computers together and tie them together, they can't solve the issues we are finally facing. They aren't going to solve conflict. It's not a matter of data that keeps health disparity and disparity of opportunity unresolved. It's not our inability to crunch numbers faster. It's beyond that. And to imagine look, I think discovery, when people say, well, healthcare, we need to streamline, optimize, drive down the costs. And I agree with all of those things. But give us the creativity, the space for creativity of how to drive down costs. I'm pretty certain if the healthcare we have today and our abilities in the healthcare system that we have today, as marvelous as they are, if they were frozen, I don't know if it's ever going to be possible to drive down the costs. But if we can do the research that helps us to manage diseases better and to prevent disease and to ensure wellness, if we're given the freedom to imagine different ways to do that, I think it's integral to driving costs down. You got me on a high horse for this.
Well, I want to explore even further about the idea of how we create then the environment, how we create the environment where that kind of creative energy continues to be unleashed.
Do you think, I would suggest a suggestion. I'd love now to have an exchange rather than, actually, you're a lovely person. I didn't mean that we. Are we crisp and clear about the value of what we do? Hank Klimanoff's course on these cold cases. We know instinctively somehow that that's valuable. Otherwise, it wouldn't. We'd imagine we could sell newspapers or have people log on to online news outlets, or that it would get network coverage. We know somehow inside that that's valuable, but we're not very good at articulating why. And if you can't articulate why, you can't explain to people why the yet undiscovered, the yet unsuccessful work we're doing has promise. I do wonder.
So that's really our challenge,
I think
is
that's our
to
challenge.
figure out a better way of saying that in many different languages.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's we have, we're now asked, in fact, there was just a law passed that Congress is going to have more oversight on the National Science Foundation in order that the purposes of science can be understood to meet the national needs. And horrible opportunity for abuse of that. And not only that, it contains me or somebody who's writing a research proposal to have to say, I'm looking at left-handed deuterons or something that nobody knows anything about. And I'm not even sure there are left-handed deuterons.
I'm left-handed, but not a deuteron.
But have to say and have to rack my brain to create fiction about how it is that somehow this is going to help address the trade deficit. And it's just wrong, and I'm not sure we should yell at Congress. If we haven't also given them the language, come up with the language, come up with a way to explain the beauty and possibility of what it means actually just to be curious. And then point to history to give people faith that the result of curiosity is ultimately of benefit.
And in that regard, we have had the opportunity to explore together the philosophical transactions, bringing this a full circle, which is a 66-volume set from the Royal Society that Stuart Rose, our benefactor, donated to the Rose Library in honor of President Wagner, and which brought out your sense of excitement and enchantment with science. And what I'm gathering from what I saw, how invested you were in that, is that it was the curiosity that was unfolding in those volumes.
Yes, it's the curiosity, but yes, it's definitely the curiosity. But it's not the science curiosity, right? The science, some of it's wrong. Okay, so just so you know, this spans how many hundreds of years? Well, the 66 volumes are all from one. I don't know that. This is a period of time. We're talking about the most celebrated editor-in-chief. So this is about the only English-speaking scientific journal of its day. The most celebrated editor-in-chief was Isaac Newton, okay, who apparently was quite a pill. And And there's some wonderful stories about him keeping people from publishing in it because of certain professional jealousies and things like that. So lovely politics. But, and so because of the science of its day, the value of the science itself when I read this thing is not what's fascinating. What's fascinating is the example of the creativity of these people. And maybe it's part of my thirst for wishing I could explain to others why academic pursuit, beyond job training, which we do, which is fine, but why academic pursuit is marvelous and beneficial, and it raises the human condition.
And that, I mean, I take that as one of the ideas coming from this conversation, that really it's a challenge to all of us to think about that creatively and also articulate that so other people can hear it and understand it and feel it and want to be a part of it and support it.
Exactly.
So Jim, you have invested yourself enormously in this institution, and yet we're privileged to hear and see about other activities that have also nurtured your spirit in so many different ways. And I'm wondering what you're thinking about will be some of the creative endeavors that you will pursue following this phase of creativity.
The home that we will be exiled to, by the way, as you probably know, there is really, I think, and it should be a requirement, it's not, but it is a professional courtesy for past presidents to be absent for at least a year. Just absent, absent from the city. And there are certain committees and advisory boards that I sit on in the city that will just be gone. Debbie and I will be gone. And yes, we'll be exiled to a home we built a couple years ago in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. So it's not a bad place to be. But we built it in such a way, I shouldn't say it, it worked out in such a way. There's some terrific shop space in
well,
this
what do
thing.
you know?
And I actually do have it's interesting, I do have a concept for another clock. I've already shown it to Debbie and she doesn't want it in the house, so it'll probably be, in one iteration it involves a bicycle wheel, so you can understand why. Don't laugh until you've seen it. It could be really good. It could be really good. And car work, et cetera. The buzzwords, we have not made plans, and I have not made plans. In fact, I've been cautioned, in fact, the only plan I've made, I do not imagine another career-style position, regular position. And I've been cautioned, don't commit to things early. And I told a group the other day that just as our university vision statement has certain key words that give us guidance, there are certain key words that Debbie and I talk about. And if we were going to write a vision statement, which we are not going to do, but
Need a committee.
But those keywords would be, and I've shared this with some others, the keywords would be meaningful. I wonder if things are meaningful. Fulfilling. Family would be in that list. Friends. It's the old cliche is lonely at the top. I think it's probably as lonely as you make it, and I have made it too lonely. I have a large Rolodex. None of the kids on a Rolodex. I have a large speed dial of a zillion professional friends. People that if I pulled my phone out and called right now, they'd say, oh, that's Jim Wagner, I'll take it. And the overwhelming, there's a difference between professional friends and personal friends. Professional friends, when you're together working on a car or together, I'm not a golfer, but on a golf course or some of the other sort of community sport activities that would bring you outside of the university, there's always an underlying, what ties you together is this professional tie. I've done a really lousy job of nurturing personal friends. And so friends would be on that list. That was said negatively. I'm excited about the possibility of nurturing more friends. Lucrative is not on the list. Emory's been very generous. I don't mind getting paid for something I might do, but it would have to satisfy those other things, be meaningful, be fulfilling, and enriching financially would be fine. But it's not a requirement of that vision going forward. I'll have a different view of the sky from where we're going.
Yes.
I get to see, it's interesting, I get to see more black. The sky, you don't know this, but, because you don't, but if you look up the sky here, the background is red. There's a reddish glow to the background of Atlanta. And stars have to be bright enough to pierce through that. The photography you do is shot after shot after shot, and then you stack them together on a computer, and you can bring things out. But there's only so far you can get to black. In other words, I'm going to really enjoy an increased amount of nothingness in the sky. The naked eye there, looking out from the beach, the naked eye sees the Milky Way.
Well, I think that's a pretty good vision statement, actually, that you're seeking an increased amount of
Nothingness.
And I just want to thank you for your willingness to engage in this conversation. I never had a question about your creative energies and perspectives, and I'm also grateful the idea around the creativity conversations is to share that spark that exists in the ideas in all of us, and in some way, in something that we might talk about or think about or reflect upon together, that it might ignite that in others and also our senses of community. So.
Let me say that I've had one more word on that list of the future, and the word is gratitude. And that's such a powerful word, because I will look back with great gratitude, and I hope to live, all days. It's something we don't do often, particularly when we have this long list of irritating things that you'd rather not do. But I'm grateful. Actually, I'm grateful for having this little conversation, grateful for those who showed up today. Thank you, Rosemary.
Well, we're most grateful to you, Jim. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of our community and sharing with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here.